Welcome back, Tyrants. Today I have a somewhat controversial topic to talk about, and that's going to be, was Whitebeard the strongest man at Marineford? Was he still the top of the top? Was he the strongest Yonko? Now, I've seen various discussions on this, and just about all of them say that no, he was the weakest. He was out of his prime. He just wasn't the top. And personally, I disagree. While I don't think Whitebeard was at his prime or at the top of his game, because clearly he was having health issues and he had been off his medication, so there's clearly a weakened factor to Whitebeard here, but he is still the top dog. So what I'm going to do today is discuss my reasoning for why I think he's still the top, and why I don't see any of the other Yonko being stronger than him, even with his display at Marineford. The first thing I want to talk about is the build-up to Whitebeard's character. The build-up to the strongest man in the world. There are various factors that not only inform you that this man is the top, but that kind of keep hammering that point home. You have the original panel where we're introduced to Whitebeard in the fullest, and he has the title card of World's Strongest Man. And you have this pan out, and you see this giant being compared to Rockstar and his other crewmates, and you see just this setting where Whitebeard's hooked up to all this machinery. It looks like he's in bad health, yet he still holds that title card of World's Strongest Man. And that being your first introduction into Whitebeard, you question it. You're like, is this real? Do people not know he's sick? What's the deal behind it? And while I think that Whitebeard's declining health wasn't a widely known fact, I think that it was either known or expected by some of the other top tiers. I don't think people would be as remiss to be like, he's 72 years old. There's no way he's in prime condition at 72 years old. So whether they knew about, the health or not, I don't think it's as big as a mystery, because he's an old man, All the people that would be able to recognize his strength in any capacity were all older generations, or at least for the most part, older generations. So they know how their power has been affected by getting older. They'll expect the same from him, even if he's the world's strongest. And with that in mind, we still have these older generations saying, no, this man is the world's strongest. When Garp brings up Rayleigh at Sabondium, and they're talking about if they need to send people over there to capture him, Garp mentions that, we can't handle this. The Marines can't handle two legends at the same time. Garp is well aware that they need every single resource they can possibly muster, because Whitebeard's coming. And Garp mentions it again when he's talking to Ace and Impel Down, where he's talking about how essentially they've angered the King of the Sea. They've angered what's Poseidon, what's Neptune to the pirate world. So Garp is well aware that what's coming, what's going to happen, is going to be monumental, and that even at 72 years old, the person that's currently coming to take them down is a force to be reckoned with, unlike any other. And you have others like Sengoku. During the war, Sengoku makes multiple claims that Whitebeard not only is still the strongest, but has the capability of winning this war and or destroying the world. He mentions that on several occasions. He tells the Marines, be prepared. We have essentially this battle. We have warlords, we have admirals, we have all these Marines, we have giants. We still might lose this, because that's Whitebeard. And that's a huge deal, because Sengoku is not going to tell, his army, his Marines, hey, that person over there is the strongest, if he doesn't mean it. He's not going to hype up this person as a wall that you can't surpass in a war where you're trying to win, if he doesn't mean it. And we see Sengoku throughout the war constantly mentioning, like, he still has this much power. He's still able to do this much. He's not even going serious yet. And he keeps saying these things like this throughout the war, just giving you inklings of, like, if Whitebeard wanted to, if he really didn't have anything holding him back, he would be sweeping this area. And that's not necessarily saying that he could take on the entirety of Marine HQ by himself. It's just that if he has nothing holding him back, really he doesn't even need to be at Marine HQ. You know, he can spam tsunamis if he wants. He can tilt the earth of Marine HQ while he's not there. You know, he doesn't have to be on this landform to destroy it. And I think that's completely evident as once Ace gets freed and essentially is leaving, he starts going to town on this place. And when he does, Sengoku again comments on how much power this man has. So possibly the two people of this world that know the most about how Whitebeard's power is tremendously scary, you know, they're still commenting saying that this man is the world's strongest. This man is the king. And I think they have valuable reason to say so. So what I'm going to do now is talk about some of the strength feats that Whitebeard has. And we're going to use these a little bit later in the video to talk about his ability to perform against other Yonko. And we're going to see how those kind of stack out. But I kind of just want to do a rundown of what this man can do. Now, Whitebeard has two big factors that make him the monster that he is. And that's his overwhelming strength by itself and his devil fruit by itself. These two factors make him a monster. When you combine them, that's what makes him the strongest man in the world. But we'll focus on the strength first. The things we see Whitebeard do with just pure strength in Marineford, astonishing, completely astonishing. My favorite like soul strength feat is when he's up against John Giant. So you have this massive giant swinging his sword around, you know, taking out fodder left and right, causing storms everywhere, just being a general nuisance. And he comes up to Whitebeard, and Whitebeard, without budging, without moving, just waits for John Giant to swing. And he does, and he does a downward thrust with his sword, and Whitebeard casually parries it with his glaive. And this is one-handed, just holds his glaive up, stops it. He stops a downward thrust from a giant with one hand. Doesn't even budge. Like, at most, the ice cracks underneath him. That's it. And he holds it there. He holds it there for a little bit, and he says, "You're in our way." And then he sends it back. He reflects this giant who, one, was just coming down on him with all the force he had. Couldn't make him budge. And then he gets sent flying back from just a casual parry swing from Whitebeard. And this looks effortless. Like, you know, Whitebeard's not grunting, he's not struggling, he literally just pushes it back. And this is a giant we're talking about, you know, supposedly the strongest race. It's such a casual but insane strength feat that I think it gets overlooked more often than it should, just because of it's more of an epic moment and it's not a huge moment. But I think that in itself defines a good portion of why this man is so strong, why this man is referred to as the strongest man. Because even giants, when they have the upper hand, are insignificant to him. And we have the other giant, Ron's, I believe. He takes out Ron's at one hand. And now, portions of that are with his devil fruit, so I won't talk about that part quite yet, but I'm more of talking about being able to lift a giant with one hand and throw him. He throws a giant as if, you know, he's throwing a ball. Just chucks it behind him. Again, casual. It's nothing to Whitebeard. And these giants, you know, they're not like how Whitebeard is a big human. These giants are taller than ships. You know, Ron's is bigger than the Moby Dick. When he runs up to Whitebeard, he's standing over the Moby Dick. And yet still Whitebeard can casually grab him and throw him how many ever yards, meters you want to say behind him. Effortless. Completely effortless. And at this point, Whitebeard hasn't moved from his spot since he came out of the ship. So this is kind of like an attack that Ron's does and Whitebeard more or less counters, I want to say. And you see how simple he counters that. He doesn't move from this spot to counter that attack. He just does it and it's over in seconds. A reoccurring feat, which is interesting, is that a lot of the basic strength feats that Whitebeard does, he does with one hand. Another one is when he stops the paddle ship from getting too far into Marineford. They're rushing in, they're about to do a final charge, and Whitebeard stops it. And this is after he's taken a lot of damage. I believe this is after his heart attack. I think he has the hole in his chest by this point. And he's holding back a ship with one hand. And not just holding it back, he stops it as it's charging forward. He stops the momentum as it's charging forward with one hand. And even then, we don't see him struggle with that. We don't see him trying to hold his ship. The ship stops when it comes in contact with his hand, and that's it. So on strength alone, this man is a monster. This man has no peers. But now let's talk about his devil fruit, the Guruguru no Mi. Now this fruit is given the title of being the strongest paramecia fruit, on par with that of Logia's when it comes to destructive capability. And that's no joke at all. The amount of destructive nature this fruit carries is unmatched. The amount of things you can do by sending shockwaves and earthquakes through any kind of medium, it's something that you don't really think about until you see Whitebeard use it. And then you're like, the applications of this fruit are terrifying. We see Whitebeard do things like create tsunamis, and one of the things about creating a tsunami, and what that kind of brings up, is that think about if he wants to do this on a place where he's not at. Think about if he wants to do this on a place where he's not trying to save someone. If he just wants to send a tsunami your way, what do you do against that? Clearly they have Aokiji, luckily, who can freeze said tsunami, which there's probably diminishing returns on how much that's going to help if he's just sending a ton of them there. But, without someone to counter exact water moves, what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do when he decides to tilt the world? What happens when he takes the ground you're standing on and turns it 90 degrees? There really aren't counters for his fruit. Another benefit is that it's a vibration-based fruit, meaning there's no real way to stop the vibrations once they've been set. And this is shown, for example, when Aokiji freezes Whitebeard, and he just vibrates through it. It's casual. But the biggest thing about that is there's no defense against vibration. Haki doesn't protect the inside of your body as much as it does the outside. So if you get punched with an earthquake, you're going to feel that no matter how much Haki you put up, because that bypasses natural defenses. That bypasses Haki, that bypasses steel and cement. It goes through everything. The only thing we haven't seen it go through is the special wall that was created by the Marines. And I have reason to believe, I don't know if it's ever confirmed or not, but that's a sea stone wall or a wall with sea stone properties. And what we've seen with that is that if it's made of sea stone, if it has some kind of sea stone capability, it completely cancels out a devil fruit. Whether it's touching the person or whether it's just coming in contact, when the sea hits some form of devil fruit, it just cancels it. So I think that's why that wall was receptive to the Quake Punch. Other than that, we haven't seen anything kind of absorb, deflect, or really deal with Whitebeard's quakes like that. The other thing you could possibly mention is the kind of Haki barrier that the three admirals put up, which is a weird one because it takes three of them to do it, and they did it to an after attack. So it wasn't like they blocked the direct punch, they blocked the shock waves that traveled through while after the punch. So I'm not sure how well that gauges if you're in close combat. If he punches you directly, can you just block it with Haki like that? Is there a reason it took three of them other than he's just that strong or their fruit's just that strong? So, if you have three admiral level people, you might be able to block a punch. But that's not super good in many fights. The biggest thing I want to say about this fruit that I don't think has a clear explanation or needs one is the fact that when Whitebeard punches and he cracks the atmosphere, when he uses the fruit with a punch, anything on the other end of that punch is not getting through. We've seen Akainu clash with it. We've seen people try and break through it. We've seen Ron's, clashing with it. Nothing ever gets through that quick barrier. Even when Blackbeard has the fruit and he's fighting against Sengoku, Sengoku's shockwave clashes with the barrier, doesn't get through. There's no attack that we've seen that has gone through the earthquake barrier. And I think that's important to say because Whitebeard uses that as a counter for a lot of things. When Aokiji is sending ranged attacks, he uses a quake barrier. When Ron comes up, he uses a quake barrier, which he holds in place and adds more pressure to. So he can hold that wall in place and he can send more power to it, send more shockwaves to it. So I think that barrier in itself is a very important part of this fruit that gets overlooked. But not only does Whitebeard have a wall of strength feats, he's got tons of endurance feats. Now, I think there's an argument to say endurance versus durability, and we can say that he wasn't as durable as he could have been. He did take damage from gunshots, from cannons, from swords. He had a hole in his chest. He had a sword through the chest, many swords through the chest. And while he was able to tank through that and keep moving, he still took that damage. So I don't think durability is the right word to put to Whitebeard. I say endurance. Because the sheer amount of things he goes through during the war, and to be able to keep fighting after going through those things, it's another level of being monstrous. And you have to keep in mind that he started this war already weakened and sick. So he came to this war, he hadn't been on his medication. He started this war in a deteriorated state, yet he still took all the punishment that he did. It all comes ahead to what amounts to needing the Marines, the Warlords, the Blackbeard Pirates, and his own natural sickness to take Whitebeard down. No factions doing it by themselves. That's how much endurance this man has.